Special technique. Special technique of shadow boxing. Special technique of shadow boxing. Shadow boxing. Shadow boxing.
Yo, what's up, what's up, what's up? You are here live on the Boxing Source radio show, here on the Go Long Media channel on Blog Talk Radio. Excuse me, I'm your host, James Bell, leading boxing analyst for the Cold Hard Truth on Sports, and also run the social media sites for the Boxing Source on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on Google+. You can find us on Twitter at Boxing Source 2 and on Instagram at The Boxing Source, and look us up on Google+ under The Boxing Source. Number to dial in and talk boxing here is 347-237-5539. Once again, 347-237-5539. You press the one key to get on queue here, and you'll be able to talk live on the show. We have a 1 hour live podcast here today. Few things to talk about. Over the course of the week in the sport. Of course, basically headlined by the big story in reference to what was supposed to go down on November 4th at the Barclays Center. So we definitely will be talking about that, as I have, a lot to say about what's happening in reference to this. But we'll be able to get into details on that here a little bit later. But first, I wanted to get a few things out of the way. First off, like here on the Go Long Media channel, we also have sister shows, so be sure to check them out. Tuesday nights we have the Cold Hard Truth on Sports with Matthew Long. That's on 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time every Tuesday. And every Wednesday night we have Take This L, which is a football discussion show hosted by Kylie Mike. So we have other podcasts here on the Go Long Media channel for you to check out. All right. Just wanted to, get into a few things here, on the show. Of course, over the weekend, we had like a few, a few notable fights going down. Of course, the World Boxing Super Series continued on the 30th, as we had another cruiserweight fight in that World Boxing Super Series with Mairis Briedis going up against Mike Perez. Mairis Briedis was undefeated, holding the WBC Cruiserweight Championship, winning it earlier this year over Marco Huck, going up against Mike Perez, who moved down from heavyweight to take this fight. He had a extended layoff, actually a 2-year layoff after losing to Alexander Povetkin in 2015, then had a fight against Jer Biskak over in Belfast, in England, before he took this fight here against Mairis Briedis, and was, they'd say it was like kind of a, I'd say, an uneventful type of matchup. between these two. It wasn't necessarily like the other matchup there where you had Marco Huck going up against Alexander Usyk. So there it was, something to where Brightus was able to get the unanimous decision win over Mike Perez with scores of 116, 110, 114, 112, and 115, 111 to defend the WBC Cruiserweight Championship and move forward to the World Boxing Super Series semifinals there. So he'll be able to move forward to go up against Alexander Usyk in the semifinals sometime next year. But basically, like I was saying there, it was a uneventful type of matchup. It was, it was stylistically a bad matchup there, but he was still, Brightus had a cut over his left eye after basically in the third round from an accidental hit, but the ref ended up deducting a point, under WBC rules there, even though the headbutt was accidental, but there just, still seemed like it was kind of a messy type of fight, and Perez just seemed like he was, fairly disappointed with the result. Didn't like how he was being treated in the ring, and after the fight, basically said that it might be his last go at it in the ring there. So, like I was saying before, Brightus was able to get the win over Mike Perez to retain the WBC Cruiserweight Championship and move forward on the World Boxing Super Series to the semifinals against WBO champion Alexander Usyk there. So we have that. Now, wanted to, get into, what was going on here over the course of the week, specifically with the event that was, scheduled to be at Barclays Center on November 4th. Now, early on Thursday afternoon, September 28th, we had an announcement that a former world champion at 147 pounds, Showtime Shawn Porter, would be added on to the card on November, facing Adrian Granados there at the Barclays Center there. So, you have, like I said, former IBF welterweight champion Shawn Porter, with Shawn Porter there. He, wanted to have a fight against, Danny Garcia, but wasn't able to get that fight put together. So here they, set him up here with a fight against Adrian Granados. Granados, of course, is floating, in between 140 and 147 pounds. His last fight was against Adrian Broner in Cincinnati, where he suffered a split decision loss. But he's, fought guys like Amir Imam, where he was able to score, knockout win. He lost against Felix Diaz earlier in his career. He also fought Kermit Cintrone to a draw. So, Adrian Granados is pretty much a tough out for, a lot of opponents. But here against Shawn Porter, somebody who's, been champion, went up against, Andre Berto, got the win earlier this year. Last year had a close fight against Keith Thurman and ended up getting a unanimous decision loss. But he's, going to be ready to fight here on November 4th in that card against Adrian Granados. Now this fight card here also, it had Sergey Lipinets going up against Akihiro Kondo for the vacant IBF Super Lightweight Championship, and you have the heavyweight matchup with Brahman Stavern and Dominic Brazil. Now, after we had this fight announced early in Thursday, it seems like late Thursday night into early Friday morning, the boxing world got a surprising announcement as they had reports going on that the WBC president, Jose Sulaiman, posted that the heavyweight title fight between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz was in serious jeopardy, as they said that Luis Ortiz tested positive for 2 diuretics in lorothiazide and hydrochlorothiazide. And this was found out on September 22nd. The test was taken on September 22nd, and basically got the news on late Thursday night, early Friday morning, going into September 29th, that Ortiz tested positive with the presence of those 2 diuretics. Now, ever since then, he and his team basically said that these are 2 components that were found in Ortiz's system were basically coming from a medication that he was taking. Now, if you go into the Instagram account of Ortiz's manager, immediately he posted the pills that Luis Ortiz was taking right after this announcement was made, and that was basically going to be pill that Ortiz and his team would have in reference to him having those 2 diuretics in his system. Now, with that being known, that would mean that it would be the second time that Luis Ortiz would have something in his, caught with something in his system in reference to Veda. And now it's basically a whole back and forth, between Ortiz's team, Wilder's team, and basically what's been going on within the WBC and Veda. Right now, it seems like the fight is still on, even though, Wilder's talking about, either they're looking for other opponents, or he says that, he's trying to petition with the WBC to have the fight still go. But right now, it just seems, to me personally, it just seems really, really, really weird here, because if you think about what had been going on over the past few months or so, right? Wilder had his fight. Of course, we know about Wilder having his fight against Gerald Washington, and the whole background thing that was going on with Gerald Washington is that, Wilder was supposed to fight Andrew Warzik, and all of a sudden Warzik gets caught with an illegal substance. And so once that was found out, they had Warzik knocked out on that particular fight, and with that, they had to find a replacement, and that replacement was Gerald Washington. Now, my thing is that I'm not necessarily sure, what the situation was with Andrew Warzik, but Warzik wasn't necessarily a highly ranked contender within the WBC before Wilder and his team said that they were going to fight Warzy. And then once that announcement was made, then they basically, found a replacement fighter all of a sudden. And then, Gerald Washington basically had a few weeks to prepare for the fight against Deontay Wilder. And then, Deontay Wilder ended up getting the win by knockout over Gerald Washington. Now, after that, you had this whole discussion about Deontay Wilder fighting Bermane Stiverne. Stiverne eventually became the number one contender. Eventually became the number one contender for the WBC title, right? And he was basically saying that, hey, he wants a shot at the WBC championship that he lost to Deontay Wilder, and that he wouldn't necessarily step aside, for Deontay Wilder to face anyone else. And he was saying, hey, I'm not taking the step aside money. I'm not taking the step aside money. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And that it's been, he's been talking about that. He was talking about that for months. So then all of a sudden we get this announcement out of nowhere that Deontay Wilder says that he is going to fight Luis Ortiz on November 4th at the Barclays Center. Now, a lot of people are, basically, going bananas about this. Here it is, Deontay Wilder is finally trying to fight somebody, finally trying to fight, one guy that's, been ranked among the top in the heavyweight division, and that, this is finally his chance to, get into, what's going on in the heavyweight division. So he's going to be finally finding a top 5 guy. Now, it took a little while for the fight to basically become official. And then we had the news conference going on. And in the news conference, something really weird was coming up. The conference basically just had, Deontay Wilder there. Luis Ortiz, basically couldn't make it there, up there to New York because, of the timing of, what was going on in the Miami area. Of course, you had Hurricane Maria going through. So he wasn't, basically able to get things done to be able to fly out there. And in the press conference that Wilder was in, Wilder says something to the effect of, Ortiz, I hope you don't mess up with this fight getting caught with any illegal substances. Now, after that, it's crazy because that happened on the 20th. Couple days later is when, the Veda finds out about the two illegal substances that were in Ortiz's system there. Now, ever since they've had that thing go down, Ortiz and his team was saying, hey, we got these medications that say this is where these two substances come from. They come from these medications, and that Ortiz has basically been taking these medications for high blood pressure. And so ever since then, what Ortiz and his team have done is they visited the emergency room in order to get documentation backing that Ortiz has to take those substances or has to take those medications in order to, notify his blood pressure. So now everything has basically been up in the air, and that we don't know if the fight's going to be in place or not, or if Wilder is going to end up fighting a replacement fighter. Now, here, like I was saying before, Wilder has been talking on social media, over to a couple of media outlets, are saying that either on one side he says that he wants the WBC to allow him to fight Ortiz. On the other side, they're saying right after this that they said that they're looking for replacement opponents. And to me, I was just feeling like, hold on, man, something is going on here, because ever since that fight was announced, I was like saying, wait a minute, this doesn't necessarily look right, because Deontay Wilder, over the course of his career, since he won the WBC belt from Bermane Stiverne, hasn't fought a top contender within the WBC. He did have that instance where he was going to fight Alexander Povetkin in 2016, where Alexander Povetkin was the number one contender for that WBC belt. But soon after the fight was announced and the purse bid was made and everything like that, Alexander Povetkin got caught with a banned substance, and he was, basically suspended for a few months after being caught with the amount of the illegal substance that was in his system. Soon after that, you really didn't hear much from Alexander Povetkin. They were trying to have another fight here with Povetkin against Bermane Stiverne at the end of 2016. At the end of 2016, but then even there, Povetkin was caught with a banned substance. So you had him being caught with a banned substance twice on two different occasions. And so, with that being known, Bermane Stiverne ended up backing out of the fight against Alexander Povetkin, and Povetkin ended up fighting a replacement in order to keep that date intact. And with Povetkin having those two different things happen to him, the WBC ended up removing Povetkin from that number one spot and giving it to Bermane Stiverne. So now you go into 2017, Bermane Stiverne's the number one contender. Deontay Wilder didn't have a fight, until that February of 2017, because in his last fight he suffered injuries to his shoulder and to his bicep against Chris Arreola. And so on that return fight, that's where I was saying that he was supposed to fight Andre Wardzik. And there, Andre Wardzik got caught with an illegal substance, and Wilder ended up fighting Gerald Washington. Now, during that time, there was talk that Wilder was going to fight Luis Ortiz, and Luis Ortiz was saying that, hey, he was ready to fight him in February. But that didn't necessarily happen. And then, like I was saying, you had the fight between Wilder and Washington. And after that fight, Bermane Stiverne was trying to get that, that shot in for the WBC title. But, like I was saying, that Wilder and his team wasn't necessarily saying that, he wanted to have that fight with Stiverne, seeing that there was no money in the fight, no one's interested in the fight, or whatever it is. But then, you like I was saying there, if there's no interest in the fight, then why don't you just have that thing, go down? To me, I mean, why say that there's no interest in the fight between him and Severn, but you ended up fighting Gerald Washington? That's one of the questions that I have in reference to the situation with Deontay Wilder is that he has not faced his mandatory since he's won the WBC Heavyweight Championship. And here, with Severn being the number one contender, he could go ahead and get that fight over with ASAP. Why fight a Gerald Washington? Why fight a Gerald Washington in February and then talk about unifications against Joseph Parker or trying to go after Anthony Joshua, and you're not even fighting your mandatory? Anthony Joshua was, not only had the IBF championship, but he won the WBA championship when he defeated Vladimir Klitschko. So now, with Joshua is the IBF champion and the WBA champion, so he had two mandatories that he had to obligate to after winning the WBA championship. So now he has to, get his mandatories over with, because with him being an IBF champion for more than a year, he has to obligate fighting his mandatory. But Wilder, who has been the WBC champion since 2015, hasn't been able to defend against his mandatory yet. And to me, that just sounds, really weird to me, man, because Wilder has been the guy in the heavyweight division that has seemed to be talking the most, being the most vocal, saying this and saying that, instead of going in there and handling business. You have the WBO champion in Joseph Parker, who won the title when it was vacated by Tyson Fury, and Parker, has had his couple of defenses of the WBO Heavyweight Championship. Anthony Joshua is about to defend the IBF Championship and the WBA Championship, his IBF mandatory in Kubrat Pulev. And so now, here we have in the WBC that Deontay Wilder has a mandatory in Bermane Stiverne, and he hasn't been able to, defend against his mandatory. Now, the thing with Luis Ortiz is that, Luis Ortiz has been a highly rated fighter within the heavyweight division. But he was not ranked in the WBC rankings until recently. At the time before that, Ortiz was only ranked in one boxing organization, and that was the WBA. And in the WBA, he has been the number one contender for that WBA championship, and has been so for a while. But the thing about the WBA was that the WBA title was vacant since Tyson Fury was caught with, crack, cocaine, or whatever it was that was in his system, and all of those titles that he had were given up. The WBA championship, the WBO championship, the IBO championship, all were given up because of what Tyson Fury did. And so, with those championships that were vacated, that's how Joseph Parker was able to win the WBO championship against Andy Ruiz, and that Anthony Joshua was able to fight Vladimir Klitschko for the WBA championship, which ended up being the Super Championship because Anthony Joshua had the IBF championship going into that fight. But now, here with the WBC, it's like Wilder is not able to, get a fight in, not only with Brahman Severn, like I was saying with the whole situation with Brahman Severn. He hasn't fought anyone that has been within the top 5 in the WBC rankings. You had guys like Carlos Takam in there. Andy Ruiz is in there now. I think, if I was not mistaken, Marius Wack was, within the top 5 in the WBC rankings before they added Luis Ortiz. And at one point, they actually added Vladimir Klitschko in the WBC rankings before Klitschko announced his official retirement. So the thing with the WBC is kind of, it's kind of been really weird here because of, how they've been able to change up the rankings here, how they've been able to add one guy in the rankings without even, having to fight against a guy that's within the WBC rankings. So now here with this whole situation with Deontay Wilder, man, I mean, why is it that we're having all of this stuff going on with the WBC or with Deontay Wilder and these guys that are testing? Now, you have guys out there that's saying, hey, this is the third guy that's, been tested positive for an illegal substance, while before fighting Deontay Wilder. All these guys are scared of Deontay Wilder. Well, my question to that is, if fighters are scared of fighting Deontay Wilder, then why is it that Wilder is ending up fighting the guys that he is fighting? To think about his overall resume ever since he won that WBC belt, his defenses have been against Eric Molina, Johan Duhaupas, Artur Szpilka, Chris Arreola, and Gerald Washington. Now, if you are necessarily a quote-unquote feared fighter or nobody really wants to fight you, you wouldn't be having all of these fights here. In my view, you wouldn't be having these many fights, one. And two, you would be impressive in your wins. They're trying to say that this guy is the most feared fighter in the heavyweight division, and that Deontay Wilder himself has posted that. Deontay Wilder himself has posted that he has surpassed Mike Tyson as the most feared fighter in boxing. Posted that yesterday, that he has surpassed Mike Tyson as the most feared fighter in boxing. Now that is just, to me, when I saw that, I was just really, really low, because Mike Tyson, if people knew what the aura of Mike Tyson was in his heyday in the 80s. The guy basically blew away fighters, no matter how good they were or how experienced they were. When Tyson had his run in the heavyweight division, going into being the undisputed heavyweight champion, he basically blew through every opponent that he had. His run was, if you think about it, look at who he was able to get through. He was able to go through Frank Bruno. He was able to go through Michael Spinks. He was able to go through Larry Holmes. He was able to go through Tyrell Biggs, Pink Clint Thomas, Trevor Berbick. He had that decision win against Bone Crusher Smith, but you know, up to that point, he only had like a couple of, decision wins in his undefeated run to become the undisputed, at the time, world heavyweight champion, until he ran into Buster Douglas in 1990. People fear guys like Mike Tyson. People fear guys like, a Sonny Liston. People fear guys like a George Foreman. Here with Deontay Wilder, nah, I just don't see that. Specifically when, you had that fight against Gerald Washington, where Gerald Washington was outboxing him, for most of that fight. Gerald Washington was, getting to him in those first few rounds. I mean, up until the point of, round 5, in those first few rounds, two of those judges' scorecards had it even. Against Gerald, with Gerald Washington against Deontay Wilder, they had it even. So, I mean, there were just, instances where he was just not, he just had slow starts, or, was looking, his form was off, or whatever it was, going up against like a Gerald Washington or Artur Szpilka. I mean, those things were, you didn't necessarily see that from a Mike Tyson in his run. You didn't necessarily see that in a George Foreman in his, initial run to getting the heavyweight championship. You didn't necessarily see that with Sonny Liston. You see that here with Deontay Wilder. And so with that, I cannot see where Deontay Wilder would be seen as the most feared man in boxing in this sense. I just don't see it at all there. So if y'all wanted to, if there's like anyone that wants to come in and boxing here in this sense, you could dial in at 347-237-5539. Once again, 347-237-5539. Press the 1 key to get on queue, and you'll be able to talk live on the show. Now, I wanted to get into a couple of announcements here in the boxing scene. First thing is that on December 17th, O2 Arena in London, they're going to have a rematch between Tony Bellew and David Haye. Now, earlier this year, we had, David Haye and Tony Bellew in a heavyweight matchup where, Bellew was basically coming up from cruiserweight, being a former cruiserweight champion, going up against David Haye, who, was also someone that was a cruiserweight champion, at one point, then going up to the heavyweight division to eventually win the heavyweight championship before losing that heavyweight championship to Vladimir Klitschko. And then, after his fight against Derek Chisora in 2012, he, was on the sidelines for about 3 years plus before getting back into the division and having a couple of fights. Then fought Tony Bellew in March of this year and suffered a leg injury and ended up getting knocked out. But now it seems like they wanted to have a rematch on December 17th. Real quick, though, had a caller in here, area code 267. What's going on there with you?
Hey, what's happening with you, good brother? You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this what's it, J.R. Jemias Bell. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, good brother. Partner of mine from Facebook. This is Andrew Haynes, other known as Drew the Pitcher to a lot of y'all.
What's going on, Drew?
Hey, what's happening? Hey, pleasure. Just got your message and everything. Good to see y'all got y'all little blog talk popping, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, I had this little thing going down here for a good little minute, and just doing things here for once every week here. But just went in through the whole thing with what's going on for the event on November 4th, man, and I was just like seeing that it just didn't seem right to me. Something just doesn't seem right to me in reference to what's going on with it. But I mean, real quick, what did you want to say about what's going down with Wilder and Ortiz?
Okay, Wilder and Ortiz, first and foremost, I like to speak that there's a lot of unspoken hate that's going on in the media that I think, in my personal estimation, is being directed towards Wilder rather unfairly and everything, especially when somehow he's actually become the blame indirect. A lot of the posts that I read that I've seen up there, I think I've posted on it a couple of times, are actually taking shots at Wilder for the strength of it, saying that he's being given another out because this is another top 10 opponent he hasn't had to face. And I'm wondering, since when has it actually been the fault of the fighter who's actually had his opponents test positive before being able to fight against him? To me, if anything, it would appear that the blame would go in the opposite direction. It would go to those opponents and everything, because it seems like there are a lot of dudes who have been, I mean, for all the respect, Wilder sat there and spoke a lot recently about how he's not been able to be given that push by the boxing media, and he doesn't get that same, they don't treat American fighters with the same favoritism that they treat a lot of the foreign fighters, and I think that this only pretty much further solidifies his point for real, because he's actually having shots being taken at him in a situation where, if anything, he's the victim. It's like we can, and for whatever respect he's not being given by the boxing media, he's definitely being given that respect by the fans. By the actual fighters themselves. Because this is like, I can't recall the time in boxing history where at least 3 or 4 fighters have tested positive before facing an opponent. We can say what we want about he has bad balance and fundamental flaws, and we can say whatever we want about the fact that he hasn't faced the greatest level of opposition. But it's clear, sorry about the little noise in the background, I was on my way home, but it's clear to me that at the end of the day, those fighters respect him a great deal and everything, because a lot of them, including these top 10 contenders, Luis Ortiz is supposed to be known as King Kong. He's the boogeyman of the division. He's the most avoided fighter nobody wants to face. And here we have even him testing positive before a fight against Wilder.
Well, you have a couple of things. Yeah, hold on. Excuse me. Like, now you have a couple of things there. Like, you have some guys in the boxing circles that do respect Wilder, but you also have, like, others that are, kind of like having questions about it. Of course, you know about the whole little back and forth thing between Deontay Wilder and Jarrell Big Baby Miller. Now,
of course,
Baby Miller, he himself has been saying that he posted on his Instagram there. It's like, wait a minute, you have an announcement of, the whole thing with Porter Granados earlier in the day that gets pushed all the way up to the co-feature of that fight card on November 4th, and then soon after, we hear this news about Luis Ortiz being, tested positive with those 2 diuretics that were in his system, and he's been raising questions about it. And so, like, him and Deontay Wilder have been going back and forth on what's going on themselves, too. So, I mean, you have, like, a lot of people within the, the boxing world, some of the fans there that, are kind of like, behind Wilder and things like that, but you also have, detractors and people, raising questions on it. And actually, I am one of them. Now, I do say this. The thing with Povetkin, I definitely blame Povetkin for having those things in the system, because there's one thing to have like a trace amount of meldonium in your system for that first time around when you were about to face Deontay Wilder. But then, after you're, suspended for a few months, you're about to have your second chance to where you could get back into the mandatory position for the WBC championship by going up against Brabant Severn, and you get caught with another substance.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that.
So the thing with him, I mean, you can't necessarily excuse that with him, because he knew what the whole situation was, where he could have got right back into it with, Deontay Wilder and being the mandatory contender, but ended up still testing positive for another substance. So, Vermont Severn ended up backing out of that fight.
See, I think that a lot of it also comes down to the fact that it's hard for me, like in the Luis Ortiz situation, to my understanding, he's saying that, it was a heart medication he was on and things of that nature. And I thought that the Wilder pretty much made a valid point right there, which is that's supposed to be cleared with that commission. That's supposed to be cleared with VADA and with the anti-doping agency in the first place. If that was the case, it's like, I'll give you an example. You look back when Lamont Peterson fought Amir Khan and everything, and he tested positive for the excessive testosterone. The reason that was illegal wasn't so much because he was taking those pills, but it was because he never informed them to begin with. It's just like when you're at the Floyd situation, you have what you call a therapeutic use exemption. You have things where you can actually request that, and you can actually inform the commission if you might have to take anything that might be outside of their legal ramifications. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, if that's the situation, and that's supposed to be brought to their attention. So if you don't bring it up and then you wait until after you fail the test to mention it, it looks more like an excuse or an alibi on the other side. And in Wilder's case, I also give him the defense that Wilder came out and said that he's still willing to fight him. Yeah, Wilder still said that he still wants the fight to go on. He still said, I'm going on to fight November 4th no matter who it is, but I wanted to be Ortiz and I still want to take the fight regardless. He said, at this point, it's out of my hands. It's up to the WBC's ruling. So, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so at the end of the day, I don't see where he could have did anything more than what he did. I don't see where he can catch any realistic criticism there. I mean, what more would you want from the champion in this case? In this case, he's saying, okay, this dude's come up dirty, but at the end of the day, I'm still willing to face him. I'm still willing to go on and prove that I was the best and have this career-defining fight. But it's going to depend on what the sanctioning body actually rules.
Well, that's the thing about it is that the thing with the WBC is it's very unknown in reference to what they're going to do in reference to, having the discovery of Luis Ortiz having those things in the system. You were talking about the whole thing with Floyd Mayweather and the intravenous fluids and other cases where people have failed to notify the, VADA of the illegal substances that were being something that they would take. But there have been cases within the WBC where they have allowed fights to go through, even though, one of the fighters that had a illegal thing in the system. For example, you had I think it was that Francisco Vargas versus Orlando Salido fight, where Vargas was caught, with a positive substance in his system, but they were able to, have that appealed and make that a title fight between him and, Orlando Salido. And, we ended up having a very good fight between Vargas and Salido in that case, so. I mean, it will just basically be up to the WBC if they, have it go forward as a title fight or not. Now, real quick, I got two callers here on the line here, so hold on just a minute. Got area code 813 with us. What's going on there with you?
Hey, what's up, guys? Just real quick, when you get a chance, James, I would love to review the timeline from the house that. Yeah, just want to look at the timeline from the point that they announced that the fight was off. What camp put out what information first from the camp when Ortiz said it was his blood pressure medication, and at what point did Deontay Wilder put out saying that, like he said, he doesn't want to fight him or whatever. Now he does want to fight him. That's the things I want to review because at the same time,
okay,
it's kind of out there like it seems like there's a suggestion from the Wilder camp that this is he's sabotaging his fight and not wanting to fight him. Once again with the battle results, they haven't made their ruling yet. So we need all those things we need to consider. So that's how I want to look at the timeline from when everything's announced.
Yeah. Now, what I was saying here in the opening segment was that we were having that whole thing with Wilder Wilder looking for an opponent and, going in the back and forth between him and Vermont Severn, that, nobody was necessarily interested in that fight and that Vermont Severn was not budging in reference to, having that fight go down and, he wasn't, budging in reference to taking the step-aside money. And then, we get the whole thing about rumors of, Deontay Wilder facing Luis Ortiz. And so that buzz was starting to pick up. and then we basically get like an official announcement a couple of weeks into the, 1 week into, or the first couple of weeks into the month of September. Then we basically have an official announcement, an official press conference on September 20th. And in their press conference in September 20th, you basically had Deontay Wilder there, and Luis Ortiz couldn't make it there, due to, different circumstances. You had the whole thing with Hurricane Maria coming through, all the way through Florida and things like that, so they couldn't make arrangements to have him fly over. Now, the thing with that is that, now they had where Deontay Wilder was saying, hey, I hope you don't get, caught with anything in the system. And 2 days later is when they had the test for Luis Ortiz, where he was able to have those 2 diuretics in his system. And so that's the whole thing that's going on right now, is that this announcement of those 2 substances in his system basically happened, a week after they Veda was able to detect what was going on in Luis Ortiz's system. Hey, real quick, Andrew, I got you basically on hold here, just seeing if there was like a lot of background in there, so I had you on hold here for a little bit, but I'm gonna see if I can get you back on if you're staying on the line. But back to what you were saying, Terrell. Yeah, the whole timeline is kind of like being kind of weird to me, because to have something like that happen 2 days after the press conference is kind of weird to me. The instant that the WBC made the announcement in reference to Luis Ortiz, you had Ortiz's team, say that, hey, this is what those 2 diuretics came from. It came from this medication that was prescribed for Luis Ortiz. And so now what their team is doing is they're trying to get medical records that's proving that he has to take these specific medicines in order to, calm down his blood pressure or whatever he has. So that's what the whole thing is, happening here between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz, and that whole thing that's going back and forth with them. And so that's like basically the timeline up to this point right now. Real quick, got someone else on the line here, area code 205. What's going on there with you?
Hey, what's going on, James? This is Mike Grady. What's up, Terrell?
So,
my first question, never much. My first question would be, because it appeared that in the chat, James was making it seem like some of this was Deontay Wilder's fault. And if it is, please explain to me, James. I don't understand, where Deontay Wilder had fault in Luis Ortiz being on that Manny Pacquiao and hiding it with some blood pressure medicine. Please explain.
Well, here's the thing. Since you do claim that Luis Ortiz is on that Manny Pacquiao or whatever it is, you would have to say what Luis Ortiz was taking that was shown as a steroid.
I don't know. I'm just, it's dialogue. I don't know.
Okay. So then if in this case, if Veda shows that Ortiz had these 2 diuretics in his system and both of them come from that medication that he was taking, then there would have to be something else that Veda would have to see within his system that is also illegal. Because once they had those things shown in that initial report from Veda that Luis Ortiz had those 2 things in his system, that's when Ortiz's team responded with the 2 other, with that thing for the medication and where that medication comes from. So if Luis Ortiz was actually on steroids, because there's other people that claim that the medication that he was taking was a masking agent for steroids. So then, if that's the case, what is the steroid that Luis Ortiz was taking in order to flush out of the system by taking those medications?
I know Deontay Wilder mentioned in one of his videos that the reason why Luis Ortiz didn't show up is because he was getting his system flushed.
Yeah, but that's what Deontay Wilder said. But
Yeah,
the thing is that
that's speculation.
Sounds believable. Sounds believable to me.
I mean, does anybody? We all know that what was it 3-4 years ago that Ortiz had definitely tested positive to performance-enhancing drugs. But going forward this time, like I said, you want to focus just on strictly the actual test results. So right now we know he popped positive for this. We don't know the exact substance, I don't think. But I mean, I want to give him just a little bit of credit and hope that it's not actually steroids. I want to give him a little bit of credit and hope that it is actually the blood pressure medicine that made him pop positive. But like I said, it's further question that to be determined. Is that a masking agent? And the thing about it, you have a history. I mean, look at Povetkin for once, you know, that we just talked about. So there's a lot of questions to still be answered, and I hope that somehow, some way, this fight still go forward. I'm so sick of ragging on Wilder for lack of quality opposition. I'm sick of that. And yes, Mike, I respect the fact that Wilder has power. I respect that, and we know all about the lack of technique. But like I said before, I want Wilder to be everything that he wants to be. But it's so funny how you got one fighter that's always going through things like this when it comes to facing a upper level opponent. It's just kind of funny, really funny, you know.
And that's his fault. That everybody so James made a comment that he didn't like that Wilder said that he was the most feared fighter ever. Okay, I agree. He ain't the most feared fighter ever, but the most feared heavyweight in this era. If people fighting him and they have to always take that Manny Pacquiao, then yeah, there's some level of fear that is evoked in fighting him. If you feel like you have to get a performance enhancement, and so my question, I guess, to you, I actually forgot the question, but it was something along those lines of the performance enhancement and people being afraid of him. Go ahead, Terrell. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and when you state feared heavyweight in this era, I mean, what era are you speaking of? How far back do you go? Do you go back to the Holyfield days, things like that? Because Wilder.
I'm talking about the era with Klitschko and Klitschko. You know, the era where the heavyweight division has not been a thriller. This is the era of the heavyweight. You know, I mean, it's getting better now, but I mean that's the era that he's in. So we can't. You know, you can only fight in the times that you fight in, and it just so happened that heavyweights aren't, you know, the guys that they were. Way back
But here's my counter to that. Who are these guys that are fearing this Wilder guy? Because when I say that, I mean you compare this to, and I brought up this comparison before. You compare someone like Wilder to a Mike Tyson or to a Sonny Liston or to a George Foreman, where they beat guys. And this is what I brought up in the chat. Those guys took down the likes of, you know, Floyd Patterson. They took down the likes of Joe Frazier. They took down the likes of Larry Holmes. They took down notable people. But when you look at Wilder's resume, you're talking about, you know, you're talking about Archer Spilka, Johan Duhaupas, Eric Molina, Jason Gavern, Nikolai Further, Malik Scott, Audley Harrison.
Okay,
I don't know about that.
What I'm talking about is every time this guy does what Terrell said he wants him to, which is prove yourself. Every time he tries to prove himself, the person who makes his level appear elevated to us as the fans, every time that happens, people are on that Manny Pacquiao. And so I'm pretty sure a lot more people way back when was probably taking steroids, and it was okay. You know, it was like a commonplace. But that ain't the era we live in. We live in an era where people get tested, and it's not cool to take steroids anymore. So the people who are afraid of him were Povetkin. It was I forgot the Porzingis. What's the guy name?
That's exactly what I was about to ask. Okay, Andrew Warzik. Who is Andrew Warzik in reference to the heavyweight division?
So I don't think that's the point. The point I'm making is the next person is Luis Ortiz, who's on that Manny Pacquiao again when he got to fight Deontay Wilder. People try to get this competitive advantage the same way. If I was a fighter in Floyd's era in the 147 and 154, I would take steroids too because it would give me a competitive advantage against Floyd Mayweather. Does it mean that I'm afraid of him as a person? No, it means that yes, he has something that fear, that puts some type of fear, some type of apprehension in me, and I feel like I need to get some competitive edge over him that I can't just do it on my own. And so yes, that equates to fear to me.
All right, now I have a counter question to all of that in reference to Luis Ortiz, but I think that, hey, Brother Andrew, I got you back on. You wanted to add something to it?
Yeah.
No, I was thinking that you did. All right. So here's my thing that I wanted to add to this, right? So we're talking about in reference to this case or this recent case with Luis Ortiz, right? Now, Luis Ortiz is the guy that was supposed to be the top contender or whatever it is, right? Now, for a good amount of time, Luis Ortiz was the highest ranked contender for the WBA Heavyweight Championship. Now, Anthony Joshua just won the WBA Championship in his fight against Vladimir Klitschko. So my question to the panel would be, if this thing with Luis Ortiz has been known for a while, how come a lot of people were saying that Anthony Joshua was reluctant to face Luis Ortiz? If we knew about this whole thing with these substances in his system, supposedly, would he get the same thing in reference to Anthony Joshua being a feared fighter in the division if he was scheduled to face Luis Ortiz instead of, facing Kubrat Pulev, who he's scheduled to face on October 28th? Would he get that same type of thing? Because with Luis Ortiz, he was ranked in the WBA, for a good amount of time. He's been highly ranked there. But he hadn't been ranked in the WBC. He was nowhere to be found in the WBC in the previous few months. The only time he really showed up in the WBC was basically at the beginning of pretty much when the new rankings came out for the WBC, and then he was placed at number 2. Who was originally placed at number 2 before that? Vladimir Klitschko. And Vladimir Klitschko ended up retiring. So my thing is that why is Luis Ortiz or Vladimir Klitschko, being placed in these WBC rankings all of a sudden without doing much of anything that puts them in the WBC rankings? One, and then two, why isn't Luis Ortiz being, viewed as this guy when he was going to be possibly facing Anthony Joshua, but Anthony Joshua, ended up fighting Kubrat Pulev instead, and then people were saying immediately after that, oh, he's fighting Pulev because he wouldn't fight Ortiz, and that Ortiz is this guy, and he's ducking Luis Ortiz and all of this. But if he was facing Luis Ortiz and then you still had this thing going on, would it be the same case? I'm not sure. Because the thing with the WBA that I mentioned before is that the WBA themselves also work with Beta. And they also have a program that's similar to the clean boxing program that the WBC has. So anyone that's in that WBA rankings and either has a belt or wants to contend for anything, they have to test clean year-round. And so Ortiz, if he had this same thing going on here, facing Anthony Joshua, would the whole backlash be the same? I'm not sure about that.
What you mean would the backlash be the same? Like, give more description of what's the backlash now?
In reference to, people saying that, people are taking this because they're scared of Wilder. Now, would they say the same thing if Joshua was the guy that was facing Luis Ortiz and Luis Ortiz ended up being caught with this?
Did three people get caught taking Manny Pacquiao fighting Joshua?
That's not
if
that's
they
not
have,
the
I
answer
don't
to the question.
It is not
That's not the answer to the question.
But
That is not
no,
the answer
they
to the
wouldn't,
question.
because
What I said is straight up.
they would
What I
not.
said was straight up that. What I said
No,
was straight
up.
up.
It would not be viewed the same. It would not be viewed the same because there are not multiple people who have been shown on record to be taking Manny Pacquiao.
But who are these guys, though? That's the other thing that I'm bringing up. You have Alexander Povetkin. Okay.
Anthony Joshua is obviously afraid to face him.
Is afraid to face who?
Deontay Wilder.
No. No.
Because last year they
Nope.
said they're going to wait. I get it. Like, monetarily wise, you want to build it up because those probably are the top two guys in the division. So monetarily, as far as a boxing story, yeah, you need to wait. That fight should not have happened. It should marinate. You should talk some smack on Facebook or something and build the fight up. But way back when, they were like, pretty much, we need to let Joshua fight more before we face Deontay Wilder. They all but said that. Obviously, Joseph Parker.
Okay, and what's up with that? And what issue do you have with that? Because they said the same thing with Deontay Wilder.
They did what?
They said that Deontay Wilder's handlers said the same thing in reference to Deontay Wilder when he was coming up in the ranks. They were saying, like, people were talking about Deontay Wilder fighting Klitschko, and Wilder's handlers were saying, hey, we want to wait on that because we want to have Wilder have a little bit more experience before he takes on fights like that. So what's the difference
in the
in
last
those cases?
2-3 years, Deontay Wilder tried to fight Klitschko.
What?
In the last 2 or 3 years, Deontay Wilder was trying to fight Klitschko. Klitschko didn't want to parts of Deontay Wilder. Because you want to know why? It's too much risk. It's too much risk. Even with his sloppy.
There's no money in it. Did you just admit to there's no money in that there would be more money in a Wilder Joshua fight later on down the line than if it was happening sooner?
Yes, there would be more money if it happened later. But again, that ain't stopped them from facing Brian Jennings. That ain't stopped Anthony Joshua from facing Brazil. That ain't stopped. Who else fought? Somebody. Well, those two. That ain't stopped them from facing these other guys. Why can't they face Deontay Wilder? Because he's too much of a risk.
Wait a minute. So you're going to bring up Anthony Joshua fighting Dominic Brazil and Eric Molina at the time where he was in 17 fights in comparison to Deontay Wilder, who is like in 34, 35 plus.
He had 19 fights now, ain't he? He's 2 fights later. What's the difference? 2 fights later.
Nah, you're not seeing it. What I'm saying is that Anthony Joshua fought Eric Molina at a point earlier in his career in comparison to Deontay Wilder facing Eric Molina. So here's my thing: you can't, like, you're bringing up you're bringing up Joshua defending his title against a Dominic Breazeale or Eric Molina right after he wins the IBF championship, but not saying the same thing with Deontay Wilder after him winning the WBC championship. He's fighting Eric Molina and Johan Duhaupas. Not
what I'm saying
this is before the whole thing with Alexander Povetkin. He fought Eric Molina and Johan Duhaupas.
What I am saying is Deontay Wilder is trying to fight the top guys. The top guys are not trying to fight Deontay Wilder clean. They're trying to put the Manny Pacquiao in their system if they're going to fight Deontay Wilder. That's the only assurance they have, or one of the assurances they have to overcome their fear.
So then here's my question, right? Was there or was not there any talk about Deontay Wilder fighting Dylan White?
So Dylan White said that he would face him. Maybe Dylan White might be on the table. Who knows? I think Deontay Wilder would knock him out.
So that's my thing. Go ahead, fight Dylan White, knock him out, or fight Vermont Severn, knock him out.
The thing is, if he was to fight Dylan White, that is a fight that should be made in England. That ain't a fight that should be made over here.
Yeah, and what really one thing, the main thing that the point that we're trying to arrive at is there has been opportunities for Wilder to fight people in the top 10 of a division, and it just simply has eluded him. And I understand that you got to consider economics. Will a fight sell? Will a fight make money? You got to pay the fighters their purses. I understand that, but there's been opportunities for Wilder to fight people on the top tier of the heavyweight division, and it simply has eluded him. And Mike, I definitely understand the fact that back in what seems like Ortiz, and there's another guy, I forgot the other white kid, overseas somewhere that also popped positive. Is that yeah, you're right. That is not Wilder's fault. It's not. But he's had other opportunities to fight the top people, and it just hasn't happened yet. It hasn't. And this is he has 34, 35, 39 fights, whatever it is, and you haven't fought people like that yet. And that's what brings that question up, to him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, here we are. We're nearing 2018. We're nearing the beginning of 2018, which would make it almost 3 years since Deontay Wilder has won the WBC championship, and he hasn't fought anyone that's ranked in the top 5 in the WBC rankings. There have been some people in that top 5 that have been there for years, a couple of years or so, and Wilder has not faced them yet. I mean, to me, it's like this, right? Like it's like Terrell said at the beginning, and like other people have said before, they want to like Wilder, they really do. But in order for Wilder to get the respect that he wants or that he's clamoring for, he has to have that career-defining fight, where he could face somebody that's, of some type of note or has some type of high ranking. Now, you have this whole thing with Alexander Povetkin. You have this whole thing with Luis Ortiz. That's one thing.
Which are guys that would elevate his ranking.
Okay, put that over to the side, right? What are you going to do to fight these other guys that are highly ranked in the division? What are you going to do to fight a Dylan White? To fight like look at these other guys that are ranked here in the WBC: Vermont Severn, Dylan White, Andy Ruiz, Carlos Takam, Marius Watt. That's before Dominic Breazeale and Derek Chisora. So those guys that are within the top 6. So those guys that are within the top 6
are compared to Ortiz or Joshua. So you speaking as if okay, I want him to fight a top 5 fighter too, but you speaking as if him not trying to fight Joshua is not greater than him trying to fight any of those 5 guys you named.
That's not my point. That's completely what was the original thing that I said from the beginning? I said Deontay Wilder has not fought anyone within the top 5 in the WBC rankings. That's a fact. You can't dispute that. You can't. Fighting somebody like Johan Duhaupas or Eric Molina, those aren't guys that are within the top 5 of the WBC. They're not. So my thing is that, okay, you're trying to make this whole effort to fight a Luis Ortiz who has not even been part of the WBC rankings until recently. And then all of a sudden he gets popped with this whole thing with 2 diuretics. Okay, that's one thing, right? But you can't try to say that, oh, Deontay Wilder's trying to fight this guy, trying to fight Luis Ortiz and trying to get fights against Anthony Joshua when he knows that he can't fight Anthony Joshua right now. That's known. That's an automatic because everybody knew once that fight happened between Joshua and Vladimir Klitschko that they had an obligated mandatory defense to make. Everybody in the boxing world knew that. That was automatic. So if you know that, why would you talk about fighting Anthony Joshua right after you fight Gerald Washington when you knew that fight wasn't going to happen? That doesn't make I don't understand that.
Right? Talk is cheap. What is not cheap is action. He actually signed to fight Luis Ortiz. So I don't know what we're talking about. Like, we talking as if Wilder ain't trying to fight people because the whole narrative he's not trying to fight people goes out the window since he just signed to fight with Luis Ortiz, which is not his fault. Luis Ortiz.
So what were the details of that fight? What were the details, specific details with the fight between Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz if the fight was signed? What was the agreed amount? What was the agreed purse?
You know, I didn't look into the specifics.
So, if you knew that Deontay Wilder signed to fight Luis Ortiz, then you would initially know what the specifics are for that fight. We know about the whole thing with the Floyd Mayweather fight, or with Anthony Joshua, or Canelo Alvarez, or Gennady Golovkin, or this whole thing. Like, okay, I'll put it to you this way: we know that on December we're going to have Lomachenko against Rigondeaux. If I'm not mistaken, that announcement came before the announcement for Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz, if I'm not mistaken. So how is it that a fight that is supposed to be further down the line is able to be made and done before anything happened with Deontay Wilder? That's a question I have, and that I would like an answer to. Because if fights want to be made, they are going to be made, and they're going to be made off the jump.
So I'll give you an answer.
Okay.
So let's say there's a tsunami in China. Guess whose fault it is? It's Deontay Wilder's fault. Let's say you slip and fall tomorrow. Guess whose fault it is? It's Deontay Wilder's fault. That's what I'm hearing. What you mean? Just because a fight was signed between Rigondeaux and whatever the guy is, because Rigondeaux obviously taking a lot less money. He just want to fight versus a champion who's making money, who has an advisor behind him, who probably have a lot more X's and O's to worry about, with this being the top 2 guy in their division. Rigondeaux, is a top 2 guy, but as far as power, clout, and stuff, he's not a top guy as far as power goes, because the promoter that he was with is obviously promoting that fight. So he's a B-level fighter in that particular dealing. Why everything got to be Deontay Wilder's fault? He can only do what he's doing, which is try to fight. He's signing to fight people on that Manny Pacquiao. It ain't his fault.
Trying to fight. This is the thing that This is the thing that I'm coming up with, right? Okay. Wilder being the WBC champion and not fighting guys of note is a red flag to me. It doesn't, like, you can't, like, I'm not talking about Deontay Wilder's fault about Luis Ortiz taking this, or Deontay Wilder's fault taking, with Alexander Povetkin taking this or that. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, dude, fight somebody that's highly ranked within your rankings. Period. That's the thing that we have been raising up here. We're like saying, okay, you want to talk about unification. You want to talk about fighting Anthony Joshua. You want to talk about fighting Joseph Parker. Do those guys have to do before getting into a unification fight with anybody? They have to fight their mandatory. Guess what they did? They ended up fighting their mandatory. Deontay Wilder has to fight his mandatory. His mandatory right now is Bermane Stiverne. Why not fight your mandatory, get it over with, knock him out, and then try to go after a unification?
I got two questions to ask you. Did you or did you not, question one, did you or did you not, were you or were you not outraged in that the second fight between Stiverne and Wilder was being made? That's question number one. Question number two, are any of the guys in the top 5 of the WBC, are they better than Luis Ortiz? Were you outraged by Bermane Stiverne, Wilder 2, and are any of those guys in the top 5 that you name, are they better than Luis Ortiz?
Why would I be upset? Number one, why would I be upset about a second Bermane Stiverne Deontay Wilder fight? If it's Bermane Stiverne, that's the number 1 ranked contender and the mandatory. That's number one. Number two, are those guys within the top 5 highly ranked more than Luis Ortiz? No, but they're in the WBC rankings, point blank. Fact or not,
you didn't answer.
Hughie Fury is the highest ranked contender to the WBO heavyweight champion. Fact or not?
He's a what?
Is Hughie Fury the highest ranked contender for the WBO heavyweight championship?
I would defer to you on this one.
Okay. Right now, actually, before they fought, Hughie Fury was the number 1 ranked contender to the WBO heavyweight championship. Now, next up, Kubrat Pulev. Is he or is he not the highest ranked contender for the IBF heavyweight championship?
Yes.
Okay. So, my thing with those two guys, right? Kubrat Pulev and Hughie Fury. The champions are ready to fight against those two guys. Parker already fought Fury. Joshua is about to fight Kubrat Pulev. But yet, there's an issue with Deontay Wilder fighting Bermane Stiverne.
James, you didn't answer the question of whether or not you were outraged that Wilder Stiverne was being made.
I said no. I said no. Why would I be outraged about that? If he's fighting the number 1 ranked contender.
You would be outraged because he got to the hospital the first time and gave this guy a concussion and beat him pretty easily. Won every round, by the way, and got a knockdown.
I wouldn't be. He's fighting the number 1 ranked contender. What would be an issue of fighting the number 1 ranked contender, especially when Wilder said that he's ready to go after other champions? And if you're ready to go after these other champions, first you have to obligate to your mandatory defense. Once you do that, then you're able to go after those other champions.
So which fight were you more enamored about? Were you more enamored about Wilder Stiverne 2, or were you more enamored about Wilder Luis Ortiz? Which fight?
Everybody would be more enamored with Wilder or Luis Ortiz. But what would be the issue with Wilder fighting Bermane Stiverne? What would be the issue with Wilder fighting Bermane Stiverne?
So if Luis
What would be
Luis
the
Ortiz
issue?
was not
Nah.
on the table, if he was not on the table, then it wouldn't be no issue. It wouldn't be any issue. But Luis Ortiz, he signed to fight Luis Ortiz. So what's the issue with him signing to fight Luis Ortiz? That's what I'm asking.
Nobody. Yeah, but here's the thing, though. When was that whole talk about Wilder fighting Luis Ortiz brought up?
I don't know when was it brought up.
So here's my thing, right? We're going through the timeline. Let's go through the timeline. Because you were talking about these guys that are slated to fight Deontay Wilder are on this quote-unquote Manny Pacquiao, right? So you have this timeline with Deontay Wilder. He ends up recovering from his injuries in his fight against Chris Arreola. So we're getting to the end of 2016 to the beginning of 2017. And he's saying that he's healthy, that he's ready to go. And then the fighter of choice was Andrew Warzik. So what interest does anyone have in a fight between Deontay Wilder and Andrew Warzik? If you're going to bring up Luis Ortiz,
was he not ranked?
No.
He wasn't ranked.
He was not. Not highly ranked.
You sure he was top 15?
Yes.
I'm sure he was top 15 because that's the way he's fighting him.
No. Nope.
Okay, I'm going to let you continue your point then.
So then, with this thing about Deontay Wilder fighting Andrew Warzik, who was excited for Deontay Wilder fighting Andrew Warzik?
Are we talking about the past again? Are we still talking about the past when the president is here right now? Are we talking about the past and the president is here right now?
That's not the answer to the question. You were talking about Deontay Wilder saying that okay, he's ready to sign and ready to fight Luis Ortiz. Why would you bring up Andrew Warzik in reference to him using drugs and saying that all of these guys are being on this Manny Pacquiao? If you're going to bring up Luis Ortiz back then you could bring up Andrew Warzik. And the thing with Andrew Warzik is nobody knows who he is. Nobody knew who that guy was. You can't bring up somebody like an Andrew Warzik like he's a top guy when everybody knows that he's not.
Him being a top guy is not of an issue. What's the issue is he's one of many who feel like they have to get a competitive advantage when they fight Deontay Wilder. That's
okay, then
That's
if you're going to say that, then if you're going to say that, what competitive advantage did Eric Molina use? What competitive advantage did Johan Duhaupas use? What competitive advantage did Archie Spilka use? What did Arreola use? What did Washington use?
Okay. Good point. That's a great point.
So what's the comment? If these guys that you say are supposedly scared of Deontay Wilder, what did those fighters use before fighting Deontay Wilder? How come they were so-called quote unquote ready to step up against Deontay Wilder?
All right, I have an answer to your question. So, what did they use? Let's say nothing. Let's say they didn't use anything. So let's fast forward to the end of all those fights. What's the common theme at the end of all those fights? They always laid on their ass. That's the common theme in them people not taking sport enhancement drugs. They get laid on their ass. That's what happened. That's the common theme.
Okay, what's the common theme with guys that fight Anthony Joshua?
I guess
if you're going to bring that up,
say that he. I guess you're going to say he knocks him out as well.
Okay,
he wins. But
he's knocking those guys out too.
When he knocks people out, and when Deontay Wilder knocks people out, it's different. It's different. I'm sure you don't see people gyrating on the floor when they get knocked out by Anthony Joshua. I've seen many people get gyrating on the floor when they get knocked out by Deontay Wilder. I've seen people who Deontay Wilder self-proclaimed talking about the dude stop breathing for 3 seconds or something, which is, that's kind of funny. But yeah, who stops breathing once they fight a guy? Not Anthony Joshua. People still breathing after they get knocked out by him.
Look at, but who are these guys that Deontay Wilder is fighting where that happens? I mean, are you talking about this Owen Beck or Curtis Manswell or Kelvin Price and Sierra Lakovic?
Okay.
Is that
so
who he's talking about?
We're saying he fights tomato cans. Okay, but guess what he do with them tomato cans? He kicks the tomato cans and gets them tomato cans out the ring. What's the issue? Okay, he fought tomato can. He knocked every tomato can he fought out.
So here's my thing. Stop fighting those tomato cans. Stop having some so-called replacement fighter because of somebody taking a Manny Pacquiao or whatever it is. Just fight somebody that's actually worth anything. If I could, I'm gonna try to see if I could pull up these world boxing rankings that I saw over here, and the thing that I was looking at was like how many people within the top 100 that Wilder just didn't have, like within that, and it was like there was like a lot of people there. So my thing is that, like, who else is out there that's within the top 15? Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the only guy that was within the top 15 that he had fought, other than Bermane Stiverne, was Johan Duhaupas. I think that was pretty much it. But other than that, there hadn't been anybody else.
I would disagree with that.
Who else?
So in order for him to take a title fight, these people are in the top 15. I would assume. But you say it's time for him to fight
what happens is with title fights, if it's a voluntary title defense, the voluntary title defense has to involve a fighter that's within the top 15 of their organization. Not the top 15 in the world, the top 15 in their organization. So, like, for example, if there's somebody in the WBO that's ranked number 14 named Otto Wallin. Has anybody been familiar with an Otto Wallin?
Nope.
No. So most likely, he wouldn't be ranked within the top 15 in the heavyweight division. Or let me see if I can get this name right. Agit Cabello. He's number 12 in the WBC. But is he the top 15 heavyweight? Most likely not. So that's the whole thing with the championship thing, is that in order to defend your championship, you have to defend the title against someone that's ranked within the top 15 of that organization. Not like top 15 overall, it's top 15 within your organization.
Yes. I want to respond to one of your comments. You said, when is Deontay Wilder going to fight somebody that's worth something? I would answer that or comment to that by asking you, is Luis Ortiz worth something? And if he is, then why are we dogging Deontay Wilder? If it's time for him to fight people that's worth something, he's trying to fight somebody who's worth something. Where's the discrepancy? Where do we down him? Where do we fault him? What do we say? It's like he can't win for losing. Okay, if he fights Bermane Stiverne.
Here's what I'm getting at. Okay? Fight Bermane Stiverne. Is he not a top 15 fighter overall?
Yes. If he fights Bermane Stiverne, people are going to come for his head and say, you're fighting an easy fight that you won the first time easy. You want to take easy fights. If he fights Dylan White, people are going to say the same thing. If he fights the guy who got knocked out by Anthony Joshua, who going to fight Stiverne, people are going to say the same thing.
They can't say that. They can't say that. To me, I would not. If he fought Dylan White, I would not say that, because here was my thing. People were talking about wanting him to fight Dylan White. whether it was going to be in Britain or not, people were saying that they wanted him to fight Dylan White because they were saying that if he fought Dylan White, that would be an easier, more marketable road for him to fight Anthony Joshua because he would be able to be, seen in the likes of UK fans if he's able to do that. So I would have no issues with Deontay Wilder fighting Dylan White. That would be a good fight for him to take in multiple facets. One, because Dylan White was coming up in the ranks in boxing. That's one. And then two, he would make himself more marketable to the fans overseas.
Exactly.
So I don't have no issues with that.
Do you have any issue with Wilder fighting Luis Ortiz?
Initially, I did not.
Okay, so you did not initially.
Okay.
So what's your issue with it now? What's
Is
your issue with
the
it
fight
now?
still going to happen? Is it still going to happen?
I think that's what everybody's trying to wait and see what the ruling is. But you said you did not have an issue with him fighting Luis Ortiz. So where's the issue then if he on his end signed the paper to fight Luis Ortiz? Where's the issue? I just don't get the issue. I really don't. I really don't get the issue.
My thing is that it would be the first time that he would fight somebody that's remotely close to being within that top 10 or top 15 in the whole division.
And I'm not disagreeing with you on that. What I am not understanding is he's trying to fight somebody who's worth something, in your words. So why are we still giving him a hard time if he's trying to fight somebody who's worth something? Yes, he has
because
not
we want to see him prove it. We want to see him prove it. If he's able to fight Luis Ortiz, then we'll see if he's able to prove it. But the thing about it is that this is his first time doing it, and it's remotely close. This is not fighting guys like a Malik Scott or Lucas Brown or somebody that's not even remotely close to being notable within the heavyweight division. You see what I'm saying?
I got one more question.
So now, in reference to the guys that I mentioned, that I would have no issues with Deontay Wilder fighting at this point. In reference to Dylan White and in reference to Bermane Stiverne, I have no issues with that. This whole thing about money or whatever it is, I don't understand that, because if they're able to make fights with these other guys in Alabama, then they could make fights with Bermane Stiverne.
So you say that he has not fought anybody worth of note. So does that change if he fights Bermane Stiverne the second time? Does he miraculously fight somebody of note after he fights Bermane Stiverne for the second time? Does that change your opinion of him? If so, how?
Because if he fights Bermane Stiverne, and this is what I said. This is what I've said weeks ago, right? Before this whole thing with Luis Ortiz was talked about. I said that, hey, Deontay Wilder, you're talking about fighting in unification fights with Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua. You're talking about those things. But on the flip side, you have Bermane Stiverne out there saying that, hey, I'm not going to let you fight anybody until I have my mandatory shot. Now, we saw what happened in the first fight. It's saying that Deontay Wilder basically blew out Bermane Stiverne in the first fight. So I say this. I say, you know what? Bermane Stiverne is talking all this talk. Go ahead, shut him up, and then go after the belts. Get your mandatory done, get it out of the way, and defend, and then go after those other belts. Don't say anything about fighting those other guys. Just get your mandatory done, knock Bermane Stiverne out, handle your business, then go after a Joseph Parker, then go after an Anthony Joshua, because then you wouldn't have anything else in your way. Huh?
guess what you're going to be saying after he knocks Stiverne out? Guess what you still going to be saying? He has not fought anyone of note. That's what you're going to still be saying. He's trying to fight somebody of note. Again, I don't see what's the problem.
And no one can say it because Stiverne is ranked number 1 in the WBC. So even as much discredit as I give Wilder, I couldn't even form my lips to even say that. Because I'm looking at number 1 WBC. That would mean yes, he's fought somebody. So I think we're all logical enough to see that. You know, I mean.
No, that's what people say, Terrell. That is not what people say. James just said out his own mouth that Wilder has not fought anybody. But he's saying also out his mouth that he wants Wilder to fight the same person that he's already fought that you still consider him a nobody with.
And I'm sure
No.
Somebody.
I said ever since he won that WBC belt from Bermane Stiverne.
Oh, ever since, okay.
Because at the time, and a lot of people didn't believe this. At the time that Wilder fought Bermane Stiverne, Stiverne was a highly ranked guy in the heavyweight division. Bermane Stiverne, like they were saying, like he was within the top 5 or top 6 in the heavyweight division at that time. In multiple organizations and multiple publications, he was within the top 5 or 6. So Deontay Wilder beats him. Okay, wins the WBC heavyweight championship. Okay, who are the guys that he's facing? Are they in the top 5? No. Are they in the top 10? No. So here with Bermane Stiverne, we know what's happened with Bermane Stiverne ever since he lost the WBC championship. But however, the WBC has him at number 1. Now, my thing is that, okay, you were able to do this against Bermane Stiverne in the first fight. Bermane Stiverne is the mandatory right now. You want to go after those other guys? Handle your mandatory, and then you'll be free to fight anybody you want. You'll be free to call out anybody you want. Whatever other people say about, Bermane Stiverne's this, Bermane Stiverne's a nobody. You ain't getting much money out of this fight. There's no interest in it. I'm like, wait a minute. How is there no interest in that fight? But then they were able to have these other fights take place. This thing with Gerald Washington take place. This thing with Eric Molina taking place. My thing is, Deontay Wilder, you're that dude. You're the WBC champion. You have a mandatory. Handle your mandatory, and then go after Joseph Parker. Because my thing is, within the people that are on this call right now, all of us say that Deontay Wilder should be able to beat Joseph Parker. Easy. Am I right or wrong?
Yes.
Okay. So my thing is that, hey, go ahead, beat Bermane Stiverne, knock him out, call out Joseph, because they were talking about his whole thing with Wilder Parker for a good little while when Deontay Wilder was on his way back from healing from his injuries. So now, hey, you beat Bermane Stiverne, you've got your mandatory out of the way. You don't even have to worry about that for at least a year. Now you could go after the unification fights you want. Go after Joseph Parker. Go ahead and knock him out. He hasn't been impressive in his fights ever since he won that WBO belt. So, hey, you should be able to have no issues with fighting and beating Joseph Parker. I say make that fight happen ASAP. On November 4th, fight Bermane Stiverne, knock him out, and then say, hey, Joseph Parker, I want that belt. And then see if Joseph Parker answers that call.
Yeah, that would be great to happen because, like I said, if this Ortiz fight falls out, which looks like it could be at this point, like I said, it's logical for him to fight Stiverne, who's ranked number 1 within the WC, the same organization he has a belt on. And like I said, secures a win knock out TKO or whatever. I don't care what it is. Get the win, and then that's your next logical step, like you stated, in order to try to unify with the other people, Joshua, Parker, people like that. It's just logical. I mean, and sometimes it's hard to use the logic in the sport of boxing, as we know that. But that's why you have a team behind you to force these certain matchups that you need in order to get into a position to where you are on top and to get to be on top and things like that. I mean, like Joshua. Look at Joshua, for example. He's 18-0, 19-0, something, whatever he is, and in half fights that Wilder has. And we talk about sport, better position than Wilder, because Wilder as a heavyweight, this guy should be fighting in Vegas. He should be fighting in Vegas. And how do you do that? By fighting top people, fighting people that are not beyond the reach of the average boxing fan. I mean, 39-0, whatever it is, he should be fighting in Vegas and not at home in Alabama. No disrespect to Alabama. They support him. I'm glad for that. But for, what we're accustomed to seeing with heavyweights, they fight in Vegas for the big fights. And we just don't have that from at this point. And the way you can do that is take your logical steps, fighting people in the top 5, top 10 of your organization, and securing those wins and going for unification bouts. I mean, hell, look at Crawford. Look what he's accomplished. And I'm not saying Crawford has fought top five, but he's fought a solid resume of people. You can definitely say that about Crawford. But that question remains in doubt when you consider Wilder's body of work.
Yep. And that's the thing. That's the thing that some people are asking from Deontay Wilder, and it's not things where we have people that are like detractors of Deontay Wilder. We want to see if he is the best fighter in the heavyweight division. But in order to do that, you have to fight those guys of note. And the thing is that up to this point, he has not been able to do that. Now, he would have had his chance against Luis Ortiz. We all know that. But right now, we are not sure if that fight with Luis Ortiz is taking place. So, if not, then who else is out there? There's, Carlos Takam that's out there. There's Jarrell Miller that's out there. There's Dylan White that's out there. Those guys are within the top 5, top 10 within the heavyweight division or so, But you also have the Bermont Severn thing. If he's not within the top 10, that's one thing. But he is, fact, and this is a fact, he is the highest ranked contender for the WBC Heavyweight Championship. Go ahead, handle your business, beat Bermont Severn, and then you could go after Anthony Joshua or you could go after Joseph Parker. To me, I don't have any issue with that if he's able to fight Bermont Severn and beat him because he going on ahead and obligated his mandatory defense, which he hadn't done since he won the WBC championship. I just want him to get that over with so that he'll be able to fight those other champions. If he does that, then we know that Deontay Wilder is serious about becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world or becoming the best heavyweight in the world. Once he does that, I won't have any issues. But until then, we got to see what happens here with his next few moves. And that's my thing on that.
Just to reiterate that, look what Parker just did. He fought Fury. Fury's ranked, let me see here, was it? Fury's ranked within this organization, top 5. We know what Joshua has already done. And Wilder is like the only one that has not done that, So now, let's get it done. Let's get it on. Like I said, with Parker, Fury's ranked number 2. Looking at Joshua, he's fought Klitschko number 3. He fought Dylan White, I think, back in the day, right, a little while ago, and even that.
Joshua fought Dylan White.
Dylan White is a name that you know. So even Michael, who is Wilder's best win? Who's his best win aside from Stavern? Who's Wilder's best win in your regard?
Wilder's best wins. Probably Molina is one of the better guys. By name alone, the Mexican-American, I forgot his name, but you know what I'm talking about. Arreola, yeah. And yeah.
And why'd you pick the Arreola for his best win?
Well, I'm saying as far as name, as far as any of the new heavyweights who's coming up like a prospect, he would be a good name on any one of their resumes.
Okay,
but
and I can understand why you pick Arreola, because Arreola's been there with Klitschko. We know that, and Arreola has done some. Never had a title, but nevertheless, he's had a high contender status at some point in time in his career. So I can understand that. But even at this juncture, when Wilder fought Arreola, I'm not saying Arreola's shot. I'm not saying that, but he's damn near shot at this point. Didn't have a whole lot to offer back.
That's resistance. I agree. But Deontay Wilder broke his hand in that fight, and was that his bicep he hurt as well too in that fight?
Yeah, he did. He hurt his hand and bicep. That's right.
So still knocked him out.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, the good thing about Wilder, he's 31 years old, so he has time. He has time to answer all these questions that so many people have for him. He has time and opportunity. So at this point, it's time to put up or shut up. And once again, Mike, I acknowledge the fight, popping positive. I get that, but like I said, there are other opportunities within its own section of body to fight people of relevance. There's opportunities available, and I hope that Severn can step in for November the 4th. I hope he's in shape. He should be in shape. So if you're a professional boxer,
he's got to be in shape. They had somebody. Yeah. They had him scheduled to fight Brazil, so he has to be in the. He has to be in the gym.
Yeah, I honestly think Wilder is out though.
I would love to see it.
That's the thing. I want to see it happening.
Yeah, I want to talk. I like to say, don't talk about it, be about it.
I agree. But luckily, I think now he's in the mindset of at least proving it, and I think we can think the way boxing has been going for that, people got to prove it now. I get some people got to take off fights, but I think he in the mindset of proving it though.
Yeah, that's the thing that we're trying to, get from Deontay Wilder. If he's, ready to prove that he is the top guy in the heavyweight division. That's just something that remains to be seen here in this case. So, so that's pretty much like what I had to say on that. I wanted to see if I could get in a little bit with the fights that are coming up on October 14th, because come October 8th, there won't be a podcast on for October 8th. Somebody in this group here probably knows why there wouldn't be a show on October 8th or next week. But we will have a show on October 15th, and that will be, pretty much a summary show of the fight cards that are going to be happening on October 14th, which includes the 154-pound triple header that will be on at the Barclays Center, and the fights that will involve Leo Santa Cruz and Abner Mares. That's going to be over in the West Coast. before their anticipated rematch that they're going to have against each other. So to me, that fight card that's going to be at the Barclays Center on October 14th, that's going to have like a couple of interesting fights. You have young Jarrett Hurd against Austin Trout, and then Jermell Charlo against Erickson Lubin. And the one that I'm kind of like pretty much intrigued about the most is that Charlo Lubin fight, because there's a little bit of back and forth John between those two guys, and they're saying that Jermell Charlo is in there sparring with Errol Spence now, but this is something here where you have Lubin ready to have his first shot at a world title here against Jermell Charlo, who I kind of like feel like is the lower ranked Charlo between the two brothers, even though his brother moved up to the middleweight division. So I think that's going to be a very intriguing fight there between those two. So I wanted to get like y'all's thoughts about that particular fight or that fight card before that thing comes up on October 14th.
It's going to be a very exciting weekend. I mean, along with the Charlo Erickson Lubin fight, I'm definitely looking forward to that. We've heard some things about Lubin. We've seen some things from him. So now it's his time to get his title shot. I mean, I kind of go into this Charlo fight almost in a sense like we did with his brother when his brother fought J-Rock. There's a lot of anticipation going into that fight. We got a challenger coming in, expecting to do some big things, and we know what happened with J-Rock. So kind of in the same scenario with this Lubin fight. Got this guy coming in, got a lot of people talking about him. So now you're going to be thrust into the spotlight, and we're going to see what you can do. And in addition to that, with the Erislandy Lara fight, Terrell Joshua, I mean, I just want to see what Lara can do. This guy's been around. He's been around. What are you going to do? Can you make more of yourself other than what we already know? And we already know about the Trout Hurd fight. That's interesting as well. Hopefully, Trout can get a win and get in line to get a title shot from actually this for Hurd's IBF junior middleweight belt. I would love to see Trout get a belt back. I would love to see that. And in addition to the other fights out in California, Santa Cruz, Avalos, Maris, Gutierrez,